Cynicism is just another form of cowardice. For our sergeant are not interested in a midlife crisis. We were to do our freaking work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of the Spotlight Podcast Success Stories for Veterans, where it is our job to break down and analyze titans within both the military and civilian communities to discover their tactics, their mindset, and their systems so that you can take those and apply them to your transition. Those titans range from New York Times bestselling authors to former heads of state to other divergent thinkers who dominate their field by challenging conventional wisdom. And today we are interviewing Michael Jensen. And Michael Jensen has been recognized as one of the super lawyers of Alaska, one of the best lawyers in America, one of the nation's top injured workers attorneys, and one of the National Trial Lawyers Top 100, in addition to arguing before the Alaska Supreme Court over 15 times. He got his start as an Army JAG officer where he was prosecuting court-martials, everything from larceny to attempted murder. So how did he get from there to where he is now? Listen and find out. It's not going to be bad.
Yeah, you can always edit, make me sound good.
Yeah, exactly. I can give you like the deep booming voice as well.
Oh, okay. I like Brad Pitt's voice.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. It'll be the world of the deep fake. It'll be fake news, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that's okay. Everybody's used to that now.
Yeah, so just walk me through your background a little bit, Mike. Talk to me about your transition out of where you are right now, and then how you got there.
Well, right now I am a workers' comp attorney practicing in Alaska. I'm getting ready to retire, though, after I've been a lawyer now for 40 years. And I've been up in Alaska since 1984, so 35 years here. Before that, I was a prosecutor and officer in charge for the U.S. Army and stationed in Mannheim, Germany. And then I came into the JAG Corps right out of law school and got assigned to a JAG office in Mannheim and stayed there for about 3.5 years, where I met my wife. And after that, we came to Alaska.
Now, talk me through the process of, when you were getting out, you went from Mannheim to Alaska. What was it that made you decide to go that route? Because that's a pretty big change, especially when your wife's from Germany.
Yeah, well, you got out of the Army and I was unemployed. And so I was deciding what to do with my life. I could have stayed in Germany and gone to school there. In fact, I had applied for some jobs in Germany and had an opportunity, or at least an offer, to join a firm in Hamburg. I also had an opportunity to stay longer in the Army by going to Berlin, but I decided not to. So anyway, because my wife didn't want to the Army made a career, and I don't think I was ready for that either. So I got out, looked for work, and fortunately for me, I had a good friend who had come up here before me out of law school, and he invited me to come visit, and he must have said some pretty nice things about me to the attorney across the hall from him, because I got invited out to lunch by that attorney, and he offered me a job. And I thought about it for about 3 months, went back home to Nebraska, looked for work, continued to look for work and couldn't find any. And Katerina my wife was really interested in Alaska over Nebraska. And so we said, okay, we'll try it for a year or two. And then we've been here ever since, almost 36 years now. And it was a great decision. It's been a wonderful experience to live and work up here.
Yeah, so you thought about it for 3 months. Besides just your wife wanting to move to Alaska, was there anything else that helped you decide to make that shift?
Well, I think I wanted something new. I like the idea of the Alaska. In everybody's mind, they have this image of it as being a pretty magical place with wilderness and adventure. And I was a young man, and I just wanted to try that. And my friend was up here, and he kind of talked me into it. And I just had this great opportunity that was handed to me. Um, and so I said, well, the worst that can happen is I don't like it, and I can always leave. And I thought, well, we'll stay up here 1 or 2 years, and then we can always move back to Nebraska or go somewhere else. And just the way things turned out, as life often does, we wound up staying and enjoying it.
Yeah, so tell me about those first years when you were out of the JAG. You just moved to Alaska and you started this new job. What was that like?
It was kind of scary. I didn't know anything about this new field that I was going to work in called workers' compensation. The only thing I'd done at the JAG office was criminal law, and then of course family law as well. But so this was a totally brand new field, and I had to take the bar exam again. I had taken it in Nebraska to get into the JAG Corps, but otherwise I would have wound up as a second lieutenant in ordnance. So I got lucky there. But so I took the bar here and I failed. I failed it by 0.1%, and I had to take it over again. And I knew if I failed it again, I would have lost. I would have lost that job because my boss couldn't keep me as just a legal assistant. He needed a lawyer. Fortunately for me, I did pass, and eventually he gave me my own cases, and I took off from there. But there were so many ways that things could have turned out differently. You just had to. I just had to persevere and cross my fingers and study and work hard in order to make it.
Yeah.
Also, the first year was hard on my boss because I wasn't bringing in any money. I was learning the ropes, and he needed, as in the civilian world, you'd find out, it's all about making a profit. They can't hire somebody if that person can't help them succeed. And so, learning a brand new field was hard, and I had to get clients, and I had to start producing, making money for the firm in order to keep my job. And I found I discovered I had a I must have had a knack for it because uh, I've not had any problems ever since. Um, my field, a lot of it is listening to people, listening to their problems, and then trying to find solutions to those problems within this area of the law.
Yeah, so you tell me about that first case that you had when you for the first time you're flying solo. What was going through your mind?
Uh, well, I'd learned a lot about trial work being in the military and being a trial lawyer. So I used that. Had to find witnesses. Had to basically present a case. Um, and the first case I lost. Actually, that's how in the JAG Corps, and as a prosecutor, the first case I had, I also lost. So apparently, you learn a lot from from losing because I rarely lost after that. But it's a real reality check for you to devote a lot of time to a case, work really hard, and lose. But you learn to move on because if you dwell on it, you wouldn't be able to continue to practice. So you learn from your mistakes, whatever they were or whatever you think they were, and then you next time around you get better at it, and you avoid those pitfalls, and things do turn around. I think also as a new lawyer and new to this field and new to the state, I was also being tested by my opponents. they wanted to test my mettle, see how good I was, or um, for their cases, because they knew that in this small field, in this state, and this small field that we are in, that we see each other constantly. And so they were testing me, and so they took almost every case I had for the first few years. I couldn't settle. I had to go to a hearing, and I had to prevail until finally it got to the point where the other side figured out, okay, he's okay. He knows what he's doing. And so then things started going a lot smoother. I was able to settle a lot of cases, didn't have to go to hearings as often, and the practice basically took off from there. Eventually, I after working for somebody else who was turned out to be a great mentor and good friend, I decided to go out on my own, and that was about 20 years ago, and that was probably the best decision of my life as far as professionally getting ahead and developing. It's just been a wonderful experience to be self-employed. Obviously, there's bad things that happen with it. There's a lot of headaches. When I say bad, there's a lot of headaches. Finances are a worry. Overhead is a big headache and a constant concern. But all in all, it's the best decision that I personally have ever made in my professional career.
And what is it about going out on your own and being self-employed that you have found so rewarding?
When I thought about it some 20 years ago, I was worried about losing the security of being employed by somebody else. Using that, there is a sense of security you have when you have a job and you're working for somebody else. And I talked to my uncle. His name is Bruno. And he, who was self-employed, had been self-employed all of his life, running a restaurant. And he told me, and it's always stuck in my head, why do you feel so secure working for somebody else? Because if things do go bad, who's going to be the first to lose their job? It's not going to be the owner; it's going to be you. And that really struck me, that really there is no security in this world in whatever job you have, and you may as well take a chance and be self-employed. And being self-employed, I'm responsible for my mistakes, but I'm also rewarded for my success. And that's the part I really liked about it, is that I was my own boss. I didn't answer to anybody other than my clients, but I didn't have to answer to anybody else. And if I was successful, the profits came to me. And if I wasn't, well, that was part of the risk. It was my risk. It was my decision. So it's just been it's a sense of freedom that you don't have working for somebody else, that I have learned to appreciate being self-employed. So I think that's the most rewarding part about being self-employed, is that you have this freedom that you don't otherwise get in work life.
And how has that freedom manifested itself? What have you been able to do that you don't think you would have otherwise been able to do?
Well, I can pick my own cases. I can have the people that I want to working for me. I can pick them. I can teach them. I get a reward out of that. I can take off when I need to. I don't have to answer to somebody else, of course, other than I want to make sure that my clients are always happy with the services that I provide them. It's just that sense of freedom, and as far as and I have control over the money that leaves the office and the money that comes into the office. So that's the rewarding part about being self-employed. you got to work a lot harder probably being self-employed than you do for somebody else, because it is your business. It's your name that's on the door, and you certainly want to have that appreciated and recognized. So you don't want to screw up, which means you're going to work a lot harder. But it's rewarding because it is your name on the door, and you're doing it you're doing it to enrich yourself and enrich and and make sure that your name is appreciated and well recognized in your community. And I think I've been pretty good at that. I think I've been pretty successful at that.
And you mentioned the ability to take off whenever you want. How has that benefited your life?
Oh, well, just that kind of makes kind of common sense. Just getting out and enjoying yourself, especially in a wonderful place like Alaska. Just to be able to go out to the lake and do things around the lake, go fishing, go swimming, or go to the cabin. Those kind of things I really enjoy. Taking my kids and my daughter's husband out to those places and seeing how much they enjoy that experience. Those are the things that being self-employed I've been able to do. I certainly wish I had taken more time off, but the work sometimes prevents you from doing that. But again, it's your decision. It's my decision, and I'm doing it for a reason. So it's not that bad. But I do have that freedom of saying, okay, we're not going to do any hearings this month, or I'm going to go do something fun for a while. I'm going to be gone for a weekend or a week or so, and I can do that. I can arrange my own calendar to do that. So it gives me that freedom, which is really, really nice.
Yeah, and as a young, ambitious vet, for a lot of post 9/11 veterans, they are wanting to get out of the military and do something a lot like what you've done, and strike out on their own and move out into the world and earn money for themselves. And you talked about some of the headaches. What were some of the headaches that you experienced beyond just the finances? And do you have any examples of that?
Well, the biggest headache is you're starting out. You're going to be terrified because of one word: overhead. The overhead expenses. You're always wondering, is enough money going to come in to pay off the overhead? That could be a loan. That certainly could be is an employee. And there's all these other expenses, rent, that are obvious, but then there's other expenses that are not so obvious. So that's a huge headache, and you're always struggling to figure out, okay, is this month going to bring in enough money to meet this month's expenses? And the first year or two, that's a constant problem, or I shouldn't say problem, but that's a constant fear. But then after that, after you figure out what you're doing, you get a good name, you get a good reputation. Clients start coming in because of your reputation, and because of your hard work. Those fears disappear. And in my case, because I had been working for somebody else for quite a long time, I was able to build my reputation off of that work. And of course, I had a great boss and a mentor who helped me get started with my own firm. And it was basically smooth sailing. My fears were totally overblown. I didn't have to worry that. So when you start a new business, the expenses are the things that you fear. Am I going to have customers come through the door? How do I get those customers? I went out and I advertised. I went and talked to other attorneys, told them what I was doing. I went to organizations that I knew would be a source for potential clients. So you have to. It's hard work. You have to work to build that reputation to get those customers or those clients. But if you work hard and you're in a good field that needs the services you're providing, you are going to succeed. Um, and that's what happened to me. And I think that would happen with any person who starts out with a new business. You have to also learn patience. In my case, I had basically 15 years of patience in the sense that first I worked in the Army. Then I went worked for a small law firm, another lawyer for 12 years before I got I guess I could say courage, before I got the courage to go out on my own. So I was extremely patient as before I made that step, and and part of it was because I felt, I had this false sense of security working for somebody else, and the other part was I had this unrealistic or overblown fear that I didn't need to have as far as starting on my own. But I think you have to have some patience. You want to get some experience under your belt that you can use to start whatever this new enterprise or business is that you want to, or profession that you want to get into. Um, and if you do that, and then you work really hard, and you get yourself out there, get your name out there, you should succeed. And don't be afraid if you don't. I mean, we know of stories in the news constantly about these very successful entrepreneurs who only were successful because they repeatedly had failed until they stumbled onto that one thing that did turn out to make them successful. But nobody's going to be successful right from the beginning. It takes work and patience and perseverance, uh, and frankly, luck. Some luck is always important. In my case, my luck was I was in the right place. Uh, I met the right people. I had good friends who were willing to help me, and I had a family that was really supporting me, encouraging to me. Those are the things, and I was willing to work. Those are the things that make a success, I think. Anyway, that's how I felt as far as being self-employed and getting into this, and how that experience can translate to a young service member or that retired service member who's getting out of the military and getting into the civilian world and wants to uh, start a new occupation or a new life.
Yeah, and you've talked a lot about needing other people to get this all done. Whether it's going out and meeting those other organizations to drive leads for you, whether it's your former boss, mentor who helped you get it up, your family. You've also taken a different approach with other attorneys in that there's a lot of attorneys that are very rude, very aggressive, and you haven't taken that approach. What have you seen from your decision to go less aggressive and be more friendly?
Well, lawyers, or I've had people call me saying, I want an attorney who's really who's aggressive. Um, but you can be aggressive and still be courteous, still be respectful, um, uh, and in order to succeed. So you shouldn't translate aggressiveness with rudeness. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to be rude to be aggressive. You can be aggressive and still get along with your opponent. And in this field, especially in a small state like Alaska, and in the lower, I always hear stories about in the lower 48 these lawyers that are just totally uh, out of bounds as far as being aggressive and nasty. I have not experienced that up here. I suppose there are some lawyers that I find are nasty, but you have to remember that in my field, especially up here, you're going to see those people more than once. Especially in this field, you'll see them many times a year, and it just doesn't pay to be nasty to the person that you're going to see probably 3 or 4 times the rest of that year, and you have to deal with your opponents. You can still be aggressive as far as representing your client, and you definitely want to be aggressive as far as representing your client. But you can do that and still in a way that is respectful and courteous to your opponent. And that, in my opinion, will get you a lot further when it comes to going to a hearing, or when it comes to mediating or negotiating a settlement for them, for your client. So I think it's much more beneficial to be respectful, courteous, and above all, always be honest. If you have a reputation for bending the truth or not being truthful, it's going to come back to bite you big time. You won't be able to negotiate in good faith with your opponent to reach a settlement that is the best for your client, or the person you're trying to help. So I think there's a misconception. I think it's probably from TV shows that somehow being rude is what the successful lawyers need to do. And I just am a firm believer that no, you can be aggressive and still be courteous and respectful.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for 40 years. I think I'm pretty successful at it. And I think all the people that my opponents that I deal with would all tell you that I've been a very zealous advocate for my clients, and at the same time somebody that they can talk to, and maybe even joke. I mean, frankly, we do joke with each other, but it's a good professional relationship you can have. It'll get a lot more for your client in the long run than having this reputation as being a nasty or rude opponent. So that's just my philosophy. I mean, it's worked really well for me, and it's not. And you also have to be true to yourself. I mean, some people are by nature rude. So if they were acting kind and respectful, well, you'd be suspicious of them right away. I couldn't sell myself as being a one of those a nasty or rude attorney. Nobody would believe it because it's so foreign to me. So you also have to be true to your personality. And there's some lawyers that are nasty, and they do it quite well because they're probably like that in their personal life as well. I don't know, but generally in my business and the lawyers I've run into here in Alaska, I think they're all very I don't recall any rude attorneys. I take that back. I mean, we all get heated sometimes, depending on how deep we are into a case or how contentious the case is. So we have that. I kind of compared. I don't know if you recall those cartoons where the sheepdog and Wile E. Coyote, and so they're checking in, and the Wile E. Coyote says, "Well, how's the missus?" And the sheepdog says to the Wile E. Coyote, "Well, how's the missus?" And they make their pleasantries, and then they clock in, and they're fighting each other the entire day. The coyote's trying to get the sheep, and the sheepdog's trying to get the Wile E. Coyote. And then at the end of the day, after they've been fighting all day, they clock out and say hi, say hello to the missus, you too. Kind of that's how I view the practice. We get along great. But when we handle the case, we're going to be zealously representing our respective clients. And then at the end of the day, it'll be done, and we should be civil again. So, and that system has worked really well for me, and I think most attorneys would say the same thing, that's how it should be. You should be uh, zealous during the day, representing your clients. You don't need to be nasty to your opponent because you're going to see him repeatedly, and always be respectful. You can be respectful and still be aggressive. So anyway, that's my philosophy, and like I said, I think it's worked pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good Wile E. Coyote reference. Thank you for that.
I don't know if your age group remembers those cartoons.
Well, I do, but I'm 30, almost 33 at this point, and I think Looney Tunes was still on. It was definitely still there. Yeah, those reruns. Good. So the younger ones might not. But talk to me. Let's go back a little bit closer towards the beginning when you had just moved to Alaska. You just started a new job. You have a young wife. You're starting to have young kids, and then you had the pressure for the bar, and then you also had to learn your job. How are you maintaining yourself during that period of time? Because that's a lot to balance.
I don't know. You just take you take one day at a time. It's great when you have a wife who's really supportive that you can talk to, and you can get your burden, unburden you with your worries. You do worry a lot, but you just have to persevere. You just can't give up. You never give up. You just persevere. And also I've learned that things are never as bad as you perceive them to be. So you discover pretty quickly that, okay, you can get through this. Yeah, it's tough, but look at the good things that you've got going for you, and if you work hard, you'll get through this. And that's how I've been able to get through what I thought were some tough times. Well, like in law school, one of the worst times I had was first semester I failed 2 of the classes, and of course I was already committed to the Army, so I knew if I didn't pass law school, I was going to be that second lieutenant in ordnance, and then be a high school teacher, which I definitely did not want to do. And so I just persevered and just worked that much harder. Worked smarter than harder. I figured out things that I was doing that were wrong, that weren't helping me, that were actually hurting me, and I just tried to work smarter. And I graduated in the top 90%.
There you go. Hey, graduation is graduation.
Go. Yeah. Instead of the bottom 10%, I graduated in the top 90%. So
there you go.
And then nobody cares after you graduate. Nobody cares what percentile you ranked. The only thing that mattered was you got that piece of paper, and that was your ticket to move on. And in my case, everything worked out. But I don't think things are ever as bad as you perceive them to be. Your mind can really play games on you, and so it really helped that I had somebody, my wife, who was very supportive, and my best friend who was really helpful. And don't give up. Work a little harder. This too shall pass. Anyway, that's how it's been.
Yeah, and you mentioned working smarter versus just working harder, and I think that's something some veterans struggle with is how do you determine when it's time for more discipline and more work versus when it's time to switch directions by doing something differently? How do you determine that?
Well, in my case, I talked to people who had been there, who'd been through what I'd been through or were familiar with it. I keep repeating my friend, who was a big help. And I could see how he was doing things, and he to me he made it look easy, and I was wondering, well, how's he doing that? And so I talked to him, and then I would talk to other people who I looked up to or who I thought they figured something out that I just wasn't figuring out, and they would give you pointers. So it's important that you learn. Lessons can be learned from others. You don't have to learn your lessons just by repeatedly making the same mistakes over and over and over. You're not going to get anywhere. Sometimes you just have to go to others who have been through that or are going through it and have figured they have a different way of doing it. And if you talk to them and get ideas from them, and most people are willing to help you. Nobody wants to see another person fail, so they're almost always willing to help you. They give you some ideas that, in my case, definitely did help. I figured out a smarter way of doing what I'd been doing. The way I'd been approaching the classes that I did fail, or the work that I was doing that I wasn't succeeding at. I figured out, my way wasn't the right way, and I needed to change my whole way of thinking about it and do it a different way. And yeah, that's how you. Sometimes what you don't have in your head, as far as brains, you have to make up in your feet. So you have to hustle a little more. You have to get it. You have to rely on sometimes others to get you through the tough times. And there's no shame in that. In fact, I think you're stupid not to do that, because a lot of people have been. You're never the first person to go through a bad time. There's everybody in their lives have had tough moments, and people can get through those moments. Some have adopted methods that you don't even know about or didn't think about. And if you listen to them, they can help you get through these tough times. And I've had that. I had a wonderful wife who helped me. I had a family that was very, very supportive. I had really good friends who gave me advice. So and I worked hard, or at least I tried to work hard, and it panned out. I didn't have to be number one in the class. All I had to do is get that piece of paper. And it's same with business. You just work hard, and things happen, and things get better. So,
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining, Mike. But last question for you before you leave. And this is this is just a free for all, whatever you want to say. But if you could get a message out to all the millions of veterans that are out there that are just getting out, whether it's in the U.S. or otherwise, what do you wish that they knew that doesn't get talked about enough?
The experience that they got is invaluable. The things that they've learned, especially maybe the young, the ones that come out of high school, go right into the military. I think that time that they have spent in the military, and then some of it is probably horrible time. They have seen some horrible times, some very tough times. But the discipline that they've gotten, or that's been imposed upon them, or that they have learned, the ability to get up every single day, be on time for what needs to be done for that day. Those kind of and the camaraderie that they have in the military, the type of people that they've met from different cultures, different races, totally different backgrounds, things that, in my case, for example, joining the military, I grew up in a little town in Nebraska. I didn't know what a kid in the ghetto had to go, the kind of life that person had. I didn't know what a person from the East Coast or California, what those kids struggled with, or what kind of lives they had, or I just knew the local kids in that little town. And it just gave me a whole new perspective in life that really has enriched my life, but also has proven invaluable in dealing with getting out of the military. Not only getting through the military, but getting out of the military into the civilian world. Because you're going to be dealing, once you get out of the military, you're going to be dealing with, in the civilian world, all kinds of things are going to be thrown at you. And not everybody is going to be there when you need them to be there, or reliable, or or have a work ethic, or be disciplined. Those are the kind of things that you, as a young person getting out of the military, should have learned, or probably have learned, that are going to be a huge advantage to you in the civilian world. I know up here, bosses in construction, because I do a lot of workers' comp, so I know what's expected from employers. They have to, 90% of the time, if the person just can be there at 8 o'clock in the morning and is going to be there every single morning, that's all they care about. And they love that employee over the person who may have 10 times the talent but can't be relied upon. So those kind of things that the military has instilled in young soldiers are going to prove invaluable. The other thing that the military really was keen on, and I think would help anybody in the civilian world, was this sense of education. You always had to go through classes to learn a new skill, or learn something, or get a type of education that could further your career. And education in the civilian world, employers don't offer that necessarily. But education is what's going to get you, and education is what's going to get you ahead. So the military was invaluable in instilling in the young person this need to always further your education. Because that's, in the long run, is going to be invaluable to your future. So those are the things that, getting out of the military, where the military really, really benefited. I know it benefited me as far as I learned how to work. I also learned discipline, and I learned reliability and truthfulness. Those are things that I think are so invaluable, such an invaluable experience being in the military. Yeah, there's some horrible things that happen. I also learned that whoever your employer is, or whoever your commander is, can greatly change your life. You can love what you're doing with one commander or employer, and if they get a replacement, that can make your life miserable. But you learn how to deal with that too, because that's what's going to happen to you in the civilian world as well. And so you just accept that, and you learn to deal with it, and you move on. That's another. In my case, that was also a valuable learning experience that I had, and that I've learned has always occurs in the civilian world. I see that with my clients. So those are the things I think are proven very valuable, being a veteran.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
No, thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening to another episode of the Spotlight Podcast. And I just wanted to take a second to ask you who you think should be interviewed on the show. Who do you think is out there that's just absolutely crushing it that the veteran population needs to hear from? That's what we want to hear from you. Send us your suggestions to spotlight@thezenveteran.com. That's SPOTLIGHT @thezenveteran.com. Thanks again for listening.